We got a draft coming up, an NFL draft, and that means that you have rookie drafts coming up too, which means you need to know how to value and rank and tier and prioritize your players. So today we're talking about some rookie draft rankings. You got a top 25. You gave a bonus one. You didn't just go 2 rounds, threw an extra one in there. And Nate, I do want to tell everyone that here at the Dynasty Rewind, we do tiered based rankings.
We do.
So
it's because we believe in value so much. The reason we do tier rankings, a little preface, is, Mike, there is really no practical, except for in literally a startup draft, reason to rank one player over another if I kind of have them the same. If you have them kind of in the same tier, then whoever you can pick up at a better value and get something maybe on top of, it's the better thing for your team. Maybe it doesn't feel as good if you maybe prefer one player to the other. But if you look at their fantasy production, you expect them to be rather similar. And if I can get a player that I think has similar projections for something on top, that's why we do tier-based rankings, because we want to create the best team.
Well, then let's start it off. Who's in your first tier? I think this is pretty, I don't want to say chalk, but we know who the top guys are, the top 2 at least.
Yeah. For me, the top tier is 2 guys. It is Caleb Williams and it is Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, Caleb Williams, he is my quarterback 1. I know some people want to put Drake May up there, Mike, you included. I know some people want to put Jaden Daniels up there. It is kind of a pick your flavor thing at the top with the quarterbacks right now. But for me, Caleb Williams, he's the guy that we've seen do it for 3 years at the college level. He is the one who was also doing it at a really, really high level coming out of high school. To be fair, the other guys were as well. But Caleb Williams was the number 1 quarterback recruit in that class. He is the number 1 draft prospect at the quarterback position in this draft class. Caleb Williams, what he has been able to do for the last 3 years, I know there's the fumble issues. I'm aware of that. He plays a little bit of hero ball. But tools-wise, the production that he's had, he is the quarterback 1 for me. And then Marvin Harrison Jr., a lot of the same things can be said about him. Also one of the top guys coming out of high school. He has shown up for us throughout his college career. His freshman season didn't get on the field a ton until the bowl game, but once he got in the bowl game, he went off, had 3 touchdowns. And then he showed us the next 2 years just how good he could be. And look, Marvin Harrison Jr., Caleb Williams, whoever you're picking at the 101, whether it's superflex or not, I'm happy with both these guys being on my team as a cornerstone piece that I can really build around. I understand there's love for some other wide receivers, but Marvin Harrison Jr., I do still believe is in the tier of his own, just like Caleb Williams. And this is why they're the 2 guys in my tier 1. All right, Mike, ready for tier 2?
I was born ready for tier 2.
Well, Drake May and Jaden Daniels are the quarterbacks here in tier 2. We've talked about these guys pretty good a bit as well. Drake May coming out of North Carolina, Jaden Daniels coming out of LSU. Both had really good seasons this year. Jaden Daniels, Heisman winner. And what he brings to the table on the ground through his rushing ability is very, very impressive. Drake May, not a bad athlete himself, doing a lot of rushing himself over at North Carolina. So we have 2 guys that can definitely run the ball. They can definitely throw the ball. We saw really good production from them in college. I just have a couple more question marks about these guys. Drake May, question marks about his decision-making. Also, kind of can only throw to one side of the field based on the interception stats. Vast majority of his interceptions came from, God, I'm sorry, Mike. I should know if it's the left or the right side of the field. I cannot remember. I believe it was the right side of the field. So Drake May, he's going to be thrown to the left side of the field a lot in the NFL. And then Jaden Daniels, who I think is very impressive, but the way he runs and he gets hit sometimes, he does not protect his body. Someone on Twitter said it looks like he's a cartoon character when he gets hit because he gets thrown around. So, yeah, we got Drake May, Jaden Daniels. I think they come into the NFL, and they are they're definitely top 15 quarterbacks in our dynasty ranks once they get drafted, and we have good landing spots for them. They'll have a ton of upside. You're happy picking up any of these guys. I think Jaden Daniels especially has a lot of upside, but also more risk, I think, with him than any of the other quarterbacks we've mentioned so far. And then we got the wide receivers here. We got Malik Neighbors, and we got Rome Odunze, who I do think are in the same tier. They're right below Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm happy, honestly, picking up either one. I do lean Malik Neighbors, like a lot of people do. Yeah. But I am certainly not going to sit here and say that Rome Odunze is in a different tier than Malik Neighbors. I know that's a pretty popular opinion right now. There's a lot of people that are hating on Rome. Rome Odunze is one of the best wide receivers that we've seen in the last 2 years in college football. Just his production, especially this year, and his contested catch ability. We don't see guys that are usually that silky smooth with their route running who also win contested catches like he does. Mm-hmm. And I think that combination, Mike, I was talking about it the other night when we were working on the show sheet together. With wide receivers, oftentimes you're looking for 3 things. You're looking for contested catch ability. You're looking for the ability to separate, and you're looking to see if they can create yards for themselves after the catch. Now, rarely you'll find guys that have all three, and those are your studs. And I think Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze fit into that category, as well as Marvin Harrison Jr. But a lot of times you end up with guys who just have the two, and that's what you're looking for. But you can't find guys that just have the one. And Rome Odunze, like I said, checks multiple boxes for me. He has all three of those things. So he's in this top tier with Malik Neighbors, who obviously is another one of the top wide receivers in this draft class. And then rounding out this tier, Mike, because this is kind of a larger tier, 5 players in this tier.
Right.
Can't forget about Brock Bowers. I know he's a tight end, but he belongs in this tier too, because he's barely a tight end. We have not seen tight ends like Brock Bowers before, especially in college, especially production-wise, especially on a national championship, 2-time national championship team. Brock Bowers out there as a true freshman, being the best player in their offense. Georgia chose to throw to true freshman Brock Bowers over George Pickens.
And he looked good as a true freshman. He's looked good his entire college career. Yeah, honestly.
So I think Brock Bowers comes in as well, as one of the top tight ends. He's going to be highly valued, probably a top 5 tight end. We saw the Kyle Pitts hype. We saw the Sam Laporta hype, the Dalton Kincaid hype.
True.
Brock Bowers is going to fit that category.
I completely agree.
Ready for the next tier, Mike? We got Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. We got Troy Franklin out of Oregon, the 2 wide receivers. And then I got Jonathan Brooks mentioned in here as well. So Brian Thomas Jr., I went back and watched even more film this weekend, and I just keep falling in love with this guy. As big as he is, like 6'3", 6'4", 205 pounds, he moves so well for a big player. He is so smooth with his route running. He can drop his hips. He can get in and out of his breaks. He can create separation through his route running, something we often don't see with these bigger guys who oftentimes are relying on contested catch. So once again, we go back to that triangle of things. Brian Thomas Jr., he fits the contested catch. He fits the route running and separation on some level. And then he also fits the yards after the catch on some level. Not as strong necessarily in those other two as Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., but Brian Thomas, I really like the all-around skill set that he's brought to the table. He's really grown as a wide receiver in his time in college at LSU. And then Troy Franklin, who's also another guy that kind of fits all 3 of those boxes, just maybe not quite as well as the other guys. And his ability to get deep, he was very, very productive at Oregon the last 2 years with Bo Nix throwing him the ball, able to create plays down the field, win contested catch situations despite being a little bit thinner than some of these other guys we've talked about. Troy Franklin, I really like what he brings to the table. I'm not sure if he has as much upside as Brian Thomas, but I think Troy Franklin has a better floor than Brian Thomas. I think what Troy Franklin brings to the table with his route running, his separation ability, and his athleticism, you know what you're getting. You're getting a good wide receiver, but I don't know if Troy Franklin has that wide receiver 1 kind of potential. I do think Brian Thomas has that, but with a little bit more risk involved as well.
Is there one you would prefer?
I prefer Brian Thomas.
Okay.
I'll take the upside with Brian Thomas Jr. And then rounding out this tier 3, we have Jonathan Brooks, Mike. And I know you might be a little bit lower on Jonathan Brooks. And
no, I'm still a fan.
I understand, tier 3 for Jonathan Brooks, this is more of a talent evaluation than necessarily where I'm drafting him because of the injury involved and just the unknown so far with landing spot and draft capital. Now, I'll have to keep going back into it until I see some more mocks out there. They're starting to populate the internet. But I just love the Dan Brogler, Jonathan Brooks to the Cowboys in the 2nd round. If that happens, he stays in this tier. If he goes in the 3rd round to maybe a less exciting landing spot, no, he's probably going to drop a tier or 2 down for me, to be honest. But, hoping for the best here with Jonathan Brooks, who I really believe in. And I think as the RB1 for this class, I think he comes in as long as he gets a decent landing spot. It's probably going to be like a top 25 running back. If we have any news about him getting on the field sooner rather than later, I think he could crack the top 20.
I don't think that at all.
There's not a lot of competition back there.
No, not yet. And looks like we might not see a running back for a while in these rankings.
I am kind of avoiding running backs at the top. But I feel like Jonathan Brooks, but he's probably gonna fall down to the next tier as long as he doesn't get the ideal landing spot.
I don't think that's you necessarily saying the class is bad. I just think that's how you choose to build your teams as well. I know you like to build heavily running back. Wide receiver and quarterback.
And all these running backs will move up my board as soon as I get some clarity from the NFL.
Of course. Yeah. It's only February right now.
Can't read their minds yet. So, and Bo Nix, I love how he processes, He's got arm talent. He's got the mobility. He's performed very, very well with Oregon the last couple of years, very highly recruited out of high school as well. He's been around a while, so teams like that experience. I believe he has 63 started games in his career, 61 or 63, which I believe was an NCAA record that he broke this year with games started. He also started the Senior Bowl, to be fair. Bo Nix, someone I like a lot. Like I said in the last podcast, becoming a bit of a mock lock to the Broncos in the first round. So as long as he gets that first round draft capital, I'm not going to have a problem picking him up around the 108 to 111. I'm happy with that.
All right, so you ready to head over to tier 4?
I got 3 wide receivers, a quarterback, and a tight end here.
I like this tier a lot. I feel like this is, I almost want to call this a value tier because I feel like these guys, everyone that you have in here will be a good fantasy contributor at some point, and where you're going to be drafting them, just soaking up good value.
Some of these guys, even though I might have them in my top 15, they might not be going top 15 in your rookie draft. So there's always some
that
potential.
Is true. There's one guy in here who I feel like not everyone's caught on to yet.
Not yet. All right. Well, getting into the wide receivers, we got Xavier Worthy, who put up nearly 1,000 yards as a freshman at Texas. His speed is truly game-breaking, and I really like Xavier Worthy. I was talking on a video recently with Bob. I think I kind of fell into the narrative with Xavier Worthy that because he had such a good true freshman season, I expected him to continue to grow from there and basically become Marvin Harrison Jr. or something. And that's not fair to Xavier Worthy, who was just so good his freshman year that then I raised the bar to maybe an unrealistic level for him. And what Texas was going through with their quarterback situation, with Quinn Ewers maybe not being quite as good as we were hoping for. Xavier Worthy, he's really put together 3 consistent years of top-level production. You could argue that he's been one of the most consistent wide receivers in the NFL. I can't even finish that because he's got drop issues, and that's where my concerns come in with Xavier Worthy. But if you look at the stats, the drop percentage isn't really that bad. It's just the drops that he has feel bad because they're usually big plays down the field. And I think a little bit of that was just lacking, for some reason, the chemistry with Quinn Ewers. They looked like they were on a totally different page in 2022 at least, and we still saw that pop up in 2023.
Yeah, I think Ewers missed a bunch of time in 22, and he missed some time last year as well. So moving forward, that's something that we need to think about when we're assessing Quinn Ewers as part of the 25 draft class as well.
Yeah, let's see if we can see some improvement this year and be a bit more consistent with getting on the playing field.
Yeah.
And then his teammate, Xavier Worthy's teammate, Adonai Mitchell, another guy I love. I basically have these guys ranked equal, just kind of depending on what kind of mold you're looking for. Xavier Worthy, the speedy playmaker, while Adonai Mitchell is more of the contested catch, red zone threat. I really like what he's done on the outside for Texas. He transferred there from Georgia. And while he's not going to give you a lot after the catch, he's dominant in the red zone, led the Texas offense in red zone in touchdowns. What he brings to the table is just a chain mover. He's got some strong hands. He's physical through the catch. I like his route running. I think it's good enough where I'm comfortable taking him at the back end of the first in Superflex, top of the second in Superflex. I think Adonai Mitchell, definitely a second rounder. I don't think he's falling anywhere past that. I think he has a chance to be a late first rounder as well. He's got that kind of potential as a player that can really change the game when you throw the ball to him. Not from that yards of the catchability, but from just you truck the ball up to Adonai Mitchell, and he's good chance to come down with it. And teams are always looking for that X wide receiver that they can plug out there, that even if they're not the most explosive player, can win those battles in the air. So I really like Adonai Mitchell there. And then perhaps my favorite wide receiver, Mike, Ladd McConkey.
I don't know. I guess I'm having a hard time with Ladd McConkey, and I like what I see on film, but just not a super productive collegiate receiver.
Well, he struggled to get on the field, and that's part of the medicals with him. They have to check out, and I think so far they are. I haven't heard anything popping back up as red flags for Ladd McConkey. He had a back injury that was kind of messing with him for a while there.
That's the tough one, yeah.
I know it's tough, but when he's on the field, he was right up there with Brock Bowers as the Georgia offense. When he was on the field, he was over three yards per route run, which there was only 8 wide receivers in this draft class to meet that threshold. All of them we've already talked about, or are coming up in the next tier. So all of these wide receivers have been, elite talents coming out of college. Ladd McConkey fits that. And he's one of the more polished route runners in this draft. He's great at creating separation, probably the best at creating separation, honestly, in this draft class, in my opinion. And he creates yards after the catch. He is quick. He is not that sneaky, athletic wide receiver. He is an athletic wide receiver. You don't have to worry about him being sneaky about it. He's athletic. He can get past people. He can run down the field. He can return punts. He's got all that versatility to him. And you give him the ball, good things are going to happen. So Ladd McConkey in this tier for me, I'm happy picking him up at the late first, early second. I think that's good value for him. Moving on to my quarterback here in this tier, I got J.J. McCarthy. I'm assuming J.J. McCarthy gets first-round talent, first-round draft capital. That's what I've been hearing for a while now. I heard it coming into the season, honestly. And I know he didn't put up the best numbers, but he didn't do anything wrong this year. He played within Michigan's system, played it really well, won a national championship, went undefeated. Teams are going to like that experience that he's had over the last 2 years, being, one of the top quarterbacks at a top program on a national scale. J.J. McCarthy is going to be a player that is liked more by NFL teams, I think, than the NFL media and fans, because he doesn't have that production and maybe that moxie that maybe we're looking for some of these quarterbacks. Because despite Michigan kind of being in the spotlight a lot this year, we haven't seen J.J. McCarthy in the spotlight a lot this year because he hasn't been like the focus of that offense. But you go into the evaluation room, J.J. McCarthy, he makes a lot of the NFL throws you want to be made. He's got all the tools. He protects the ball. He knows how to run a pro system. He checks a lot of boxes for NFL teams. And I think the fantasy community is currently undervaluing that because, remember, it doesn't matter what you think. It matters what the NFL thinks. And I think J.J. McCarthy is a first-round quarterback. That's pretty much locked in at this point, I think. And if he's a first-round quarterback, you can't let him drop too far into the second. J.T. Sanders is the last guy in this tier. And I know it might be a little bit early for a tight end, but I play in a lot of tight end premium leagues, and I'm happy picking him up here. If you don't play in tight end premium, maybe he's in the next tier. But if you need a tight end, I think J.T. Sanders is a solid one to go get. He's a great blocker. He creates a lot of yards after the catch, and he's a big guy who can be physical through the catch. He's not going to let linebackers mess him up, and safeties are too small as well. Linebackers, they can fight with him, but he's such a good blocker that you can see it in his routes. You can see it at the catch point. He's got that physicality. He's not afraid to mess it up with a defender. And then you add the yak ability on top of that. He was one of the top tight ends in the NCAA this year in yak after the catch. So yak after the catch is a little bit repetitive. Yards after the catch. So I really like what he brings to the table. I think he's being kind of slept on a little bit because he's a tight end and he's not Brock Bowers, but I'm still more than happy to pick him up mid-second and definitely early second in tight end premium if I need a tight end. And like I said, if you're not in tight end premium, I think JT Sanders probably falls to the next tier.
Well, why don't you tell us about this next tier? This is tier 5. I see some guys that we could say are early fallers. Some question marks here. I know one of these guys had I guess you could call it a disappointing Senior Bowl week and game as a whole. Tell me who that is. We'll start with him. And then I want to tell you just some of the things I heard this past week.
All right. So Devontae Walker, right off the bat. He's got a ton of speed, ton of ability to be in the right place at the right time. But the execution has been what's been lacking. Yeah. This year with North Carolina, we saw a couple drops. And then in the Senior Bowl, during practices, during the game, constantly in the right spot, but just not able to bring the ball in. Whether that's because he just couldn't get his both hands up late when he's going through contact, like he's just getting his second hand stuck on the defender. He couldn't get it up in time to bring in the ball, and you can't catch the ball down the field with one hand all the time. It's not going to work. So, just that execution was kind of lacking. It was really disappointing too, because I was a really big fan of Devontae Walker coming into the Senior Bowl. I still like his talent. I have him here in tier 5 with some other good wide receivers. But it took him out of tier 4 for me, I will say.
Yeah, and it wasn't all his fault at the Senior Bowl too. During the game, there was a lot of passes that were just not on point from a multitude of different quarterbacks. Sam Hartman especially really not helping his draft stock after the Senior Bowl, I don't think. So just kind of bummed. But we got a couple other wide receivers in here too. Guys that I like one, the other one I'm kind of meh on. You know which is which.
I think I do. So Keon Coleman, next guy up out of Florida State. We've talked about him on the last podcast, actually. Some of the concerns that we've had with his inconsistent contested catch ability. And if he had that locked down, he would not be in this tier. He'd be a tier up, I think, because he does have a lot of raw athleticism. I think he's a little raw, to use that word again, at wide receiver. He doesn't really have the technicality finish where he can create a lot of separation. Sometimes he creates separation, but it's more so because of his athleticism than his technique and route running. And when he's not creating separation, he's going to have to win those contested catches. And with a 33% contested catch rate in 2023, it just wasn't consistent enough for me to make that really like his top strength and to make me believe in that to be able to translate to the next level consistently. So he falls into this tier with these wide receivers who have a lot of potential, but with some question marks. And then Xavier Legette is the next guy I have up, who you look at the film, and I would probably have this guy as a first rounder, but he's coming out of his 5th year. We do have the question mark. Why did it take him 5 years to break out? And not just like, oh, he's older. He's older, so that means we don't like him. That's not what it is. It's the fact that he did nothing for 4 years, Mike.
Oh.
Nothing. And then finally came out, had a great year for South Carolina this year, was the wide receiver one with Antoine Wells going out with injury for most of the season, and really showed up from week 1. A good player that I really like. His athleticism, his contested catch ability, he's good. But just the question mark of, is it just because he was older and bigger than everybody else? I mean, it's the SEC, so there's obviously a ton of talent there, a lot of competition. But just a question. Just a question. Keep them down.
A valid question.
And then at the running back position, one of maybe the only player in this tier that you could say is not a faller, actually a riser, Bucky Irving out of Oregon, someone I know we're real big fans of here at the Dynasty Rewind. We love his elusiveness, his receiving ability, his ability to create yards himself. And he's good through contact as well. You know, for being a little bit of a smaller running back, his good contact balance. I like what I've seen from him. And in this wide open running back class, I have him as my RB2. He fits into this tier, Mike.
Definitely another faller here, though, after him.
Yep. Michael Penix Jr., who I think we talked about it last podcast as well when we were going to the rookies. Yeah. I have this guy, pegged as a 2nd round pick. I know that some people want to put him in the 1st. And I understand quarterback is a valued position, but the medicals, they just don't check out. The 4 season-ending injuries, when you're about to invest a 1st round pick in what you're expecting to be a franchise quarterback, and for the 6 years that he played, he did not finish the season. That is a worry. He hasn't even hit the NFL yet. I like Michael Penix. I like what he brings to the table, but not enough to have him pegged as a 1st rounder. If he gets 1st round draft capital, I will certainly adjust. But until then, I have him here in the tier 5, Mike.
So, Nate, you have one more tier for us.
I do.
And there's a guy on here we were talking about a little bit last night. I'm still uncertain. I want to watch a little bit more, but why don't you kick it off with us? I think right now he might just be a really good college wide receiver, but I want to watch some more. What do you got?
Yeah. Perhaps the biggest riser from the Senior Bowl was Roman Wilson out of Michigan. And Roman Wilson, Michigan wasn't a very high-powered offense, especially through the passing game. He only saw 67 targets this year. He was their wide receiver 1, caught 48 passes for 789 yards and 12 touchdowns. So he was very productive in the touchdown category. Yeah, averaged 16.4 yards down the catch, created a lot of big plays. And that's what Roman Wilson did at the Senior Bowl too. He constantly created deep separation. He was getting open and creating big plays. And the NFL loves that. NFL saw Tank Dell do that last year at the Senior Bowl. And I don't think Roman Wilson is the next Tank Dell. Tank Dell was very, very impressive this year. But I think it's definitely something to take notice of. I think with Roman Wilson's productive week at the Senior Bowl, I think he's locked himself into a day 2 pick. And because of that, we need to pay attention. He's certainly not a bad wide receiver. For me, watching the film, he doesn't jump off the film as much as these other wide receivers, but I think you're getting a really solid NFL wide receiver, what he brings to the table. And at 6 foot 192, he's not undersized. He's got good size as well. And he's played in the pro system for, his career. He's been at Michigan for 4 years and Jim loved him. So I'm happy with Roman Wilson here. I think he's going to get that draft capital that will show us why he belongs here in tier 6. Jalen Polk. Mike, I know you're a pretty big fan of Polk, aren't you?
I am. I just really, really like what he brought to the table. I feel like he was overshadowed at Washington by Rome Odunze, and rightfully so. But if he was somewhere else, I think he could have been the alpha on a college team. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a wide receiver 1 on an NFL team, but if he's a wide receiver 2 in the ilk of a Devonta Smith or T. Higgins, if that's his ceiling,
Oh, wow. That's quite the ceiling.
I mean, that's still a high ceiling. But if his ceiling is 850 yards and 7 touchdowns a year,
Gabe Davis.
yeah, Gabe
Maybe
Davis is
a little
really
bit
good.
more consistent, though.
Yeah, I would like some more consistency, but I love his hands. Love his hands. I really like him.
Yeah, he's certainly one of the better contested catch guys in this
That
draft
he
class, and really strong hands. I think the NFL is going to like that. Seems like he's coming off the board in a lot of mock drafts in the second round. So I think he's going to be someone we're also having to pay attention to because, he's not able to fit all three things in that triangle I talked about earlier. But
Yeah.
his contested catch ability is so good that NFL teams are going to want to take a chance on him, put him into their lineup, and have him be that guy, that contested guy for their team. So Julian Polk, another guy we got to talk about. And then let's round it off, Mike. I actually ended up with the top 26 because we had to add Bo Nix. Here are 3 running backs to round it off. Marshawn Lloyd, who I absolutely love, incredible receiver, had an incredible Senior Bowl, a good runner as well, got great lateral ability, can make people miss, force yards after contact as well. Checks a lot of boxes for me at USC and barely had any tread taken off his tires. There you go, Mike. I now understand how tires work. Aren't you so proud of me?
You lose tread as you drive.
Yeah, so he's still got a lot of tread left. A guy that doesn't have as much tread on his tires, maybe. Ray Davis out of Kentucky.
He's had a lot of carries.
He's had a lot of carries. He's been at 3 different colleges as well. That definitely doesn't help in that category. But the consistency that he's shown me over those 5 years, what he did for Kentucky this year, and not just as a runner, not as just a guy who can run up the middle and get you those hard yards, but as a receiver. He was out there running wheel routes. He made some plays down the field as a receiver, and that's not honestly what you expect out of him when you first take a look at him. He's a thick running back. I think he's like 5'10", like 220 pounds. You look at this picture, and he doesn't really have a neck because you're scared to tackle him. He's like a little bowling ball out there, but he can catch the ball as well. So I really like Ray Davis. Hoping my heart doesn't get broken on draft day, but he had a really good Senior Bowl, so I don't think so. I think the NFL is going to be a fan of Ray Davis. And then Mike, the last one I got on here, I can't hate him enough to avoid him. I like the upside that he brings, but he does have some question marks for me. Trey Benson out of Florida State.
Yeah.
All the athletic ability you could ask for. It's just, for me, the vision he lacks. And because of that, if he goes to a place where he's asked to kind of create his own opportunities, I don't think he's going to do very well. If he goes to a place where they're going to let him put his foot in the ground and get up the field quickly, I think he could do very well if they keep it simple for him. So I think for Trey Benson, it's going to be a guy that's going to really rely on landing spot for me. And until then, he's going to sit down here in tier 6.
Really excited about this 2024 draft class. And if you want more 2024 draft coverage, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. We're going to have mocks all the time. You heard on the last pod, we have our own ADP now. So come help contribute to the ADP. Mock with us. We're mocking multiple times a day. It's going to be a great time. So we hope to see you there. For Nate, I'm Mike. We'll see you next time, everybody.